Good evening and welcome to all those residents who have joined us here tonight. I'd like to call the Planning and Economic Development Committee meeting of July 15th, 2019 to order. My name is Councillor Paul McPherson. I'll be your chair for this evening's committee. In the event, first of all, a safety notice. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate council chambers to the nearest exit through the chamber doors and obey all instructions given by the clerk. Trish here in front of me. If assistance is required, please see the clerk. Once you have evacuated the building, please gather in the front parking lot outside of Town Hall. Also, the Town of Lincoln Committee and Council meetings are posted on our YouTube channel, all available there to see. I would like to thank the public for attending the meeting this evening and just want to remind everyone of our rules for engagement. To please be respectful while others are speaking, and to please refrain from clapping. Delegations will have 5 minutes to speak and are asked to stay focused on the agenda item. And please remember to silence all cellular devices. Roll call this evening. We have all of council in attendance with the exception of Mayor Easton. She will not be in attendance this evening. And we have many of our staff here tonight, including many in the front rows over here. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Chair McPherson. I am reiterating a conflict of interest with application 6.2 1254349 Ontario Inc. My family business does contract work for the developer. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Reimer.
Thank you, Chair McPherson. 3 items I'll be declaring interest in tonight on tonight's agenda. Item 4.1, PD-51-19. The applicant is a friend of mine. Item 8.3, PD-53-19. The applicant is a customer of the company I work for. Item 8.7, PD-58-19. The applicant is a friend and a customer of the company I work for.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Reimer. Please note that we have a motion to amend the order of the agenda items this evening. Statutory public meetings will be considered first with registered delegates pertaining to PD 52-19, now item 8.1, to follow, and report PD 52-19 to be considered immediately after. Then we will consider the staff presentation on PD 57-19, now item 8.2, with the registered delegation pertaining to this item to follow, and report PD 57-19 to be considered immediately after, with all regularly scheduled agenda items following. Amending the order requires a majority vote. All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. We'll start with statutory public meetings. We have one public hearing this evening. The purpose of the public meeting is to receive comments from the public and consider questions regarding the zoning bylaw amendment application by Dennis Skinner. Please be advised, Section 3412 of the Planning Act requires that before passing a zoning bylaw amendment, Council must ensure that sufficient information and material is available to understand generally the proposal being considered, and Council must hold at least one public hearing for the purpose of giving the public an opportunity to make representations regarding the proposed amendments. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Town of Lincoln before the application is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of Town Council to the local planning appeal tribunal. Personal information is collected under the authority of the Planning Act and may be contained in an appendix to a staff report published in the meeting agenda, delegation list, and or the minutes of the public meeting and made part of the public record. The Town of Lincoln collects this information in order to make informed decisions on the relevant issues and to notify interested parties of Council's decisions. It may also be used to serve notice of a local planning appeal tribunal hearing. Names and addresses contained in submitted correspondence and other information will be available to the public unless the individual expressly requests the town to remove their personal information. The disclosure of this information is governed by the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, RSO 1990, CM 56. We stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the application, and council will take any comments received into account in their consideration in these items. There is an attendance list by the door, which we would ask all present to sign if they wish to be notified of council's decision. Members of the public are reminded to give their name and address when they speak. If approved by council, a notice of the items passing will be circulated with an appeal period. Our first public hearing is for the purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment application by Dennis Skinner. At this time, are there any other persons present this evening to address the zoning bylaw amendment application by Dennis Skinner? Please approach the podium and come forward. State your name and address and spell your surname for the record.
I'm Tom Skinner, the authorized agent acting on behalf of Dennis Skinner, Skinner.
Address?
Address 4459 Maple Grove Road, Beamsville, Ontario.
Thank you, Tom. Go ahead.
Yeah, looking to put in a garden suite on the property. We're going to get a 24 by 32 school portable, set it on just compacted, reused asphalt, and level it, outfit it as a house, tie it into a septic, and that's it.
Good, good, okay. Thank you. I am calling for a second time for anyone to approach council and speak to the public meeting item. Calling for a third and final time for anyone to come forward and speak to the public meeting item. As there are no more speakers, I declare this public hearing to address the zoning bylaw amendment application by Dennis Skinner closed. Are there any questions from council? There being no further discussion, we have a motion that council receives zoning bylaw amendment application PLZ ATU 201-90104 in the name of Dennis Skinner for information, and that a recommendation report be prepared once all comments have been received and issues have been addressed. We will require a mover. Councillor Timmers. All in favor? That is carried. We move now into delegations. We will now consider delegations with respect to PD 5219, now item 8.1 in the agenda, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications by 1254349 Ontario Limited. Please note that each delegation may speak for a maximum of 5 minutes. Our first delegation is Craig Rowe from Upper Canada Consultants, speaking to item 8.1, PD 5219, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications by 1254349 Ontario Limited. Craig, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of committee, staff, and those in attendance. As indicated, I'm Craig Rowe with Upper Canada Consultants and the agent for the file. I'm also a registered professional planner that's qualified to give a land use planning opinion on these applications. Tonight, I want to provide some brief clarifications on comments that were submitted both in writing and heard at our last meeting before you on May 13, 2019. As I know there are other delegations, I would ask that perhaps I be granted an opportunity to reply to anything new that I don't touch on, just for clarity, if required. I just have a few items I'd just like to run through quickly and follow up on our last meeting. So with regards to the massing and height of the proposed building, Our application proposes a site-specific exception to the medium density designation in the official plan to allow 4 stories, where 3 is the limit. Apartments are permitted as of right in the official plan, however, rezoning is required to allow for their development. This is namely due to the zoning bylaw not having been updated to reflect the official plan yet, but that process is underway. The requested RM2 zoning allows for 13 meters in building height, and we are proposing 12.75 meters. The building has been placed in a location which is largely in conformity with the requirements of the zoning bylaw and in a manner that limits shadow impacts and overlook on adjacent properties. We have provided this information previously to council and have shared with residents during our open house. We maintain the position that the amendments are appropriate for the site and align with town objectives. With regards to site-specific zoning, some site-specific provisions have been requested to facilitate the preferred design of the site. However, it is important to note that the majority of the provisions are related to the proposed severance of the existing 4-unit apartment building. The zoning has been set up in advance of this proposed application to address existing setbacks and ensure conformity with the bylaw. With regard to the proposed apartment building, the setback along the southern lot line is required relief due to a change in the adjacent zoning, it being residential and not institutional like it is on the other sides. The frontage deficiency is a result of the future severance, and the increase in density is derivative of the proposed massing. Stormwater. All stormwater collected on site will be stored on site and treated prior to being released into the municipal storm sewer network. We are not allowed to have any negative impact on neighboring properties from a drainage perspective. We're not allowed to drain on or across any properties. Traffic and parking. A traffic study was completed by a professional engineer and was submitted to the region and town for review. There are no objections received to this analysis. With regards to parking, the proposed design meets the requirements of the town's zoning bylaw. Landscaping. We have heard some comments about the lack of landscaping proposed on the property. As outlined on the submitted site plan drawing, approximately 40% of the site will be landscaped. This will include grassed areas, trees, and other plantings. Detailed information surrounding the landscaping on the site is provided at the site plan stage, as the design is influenced by the required location of servicing and other physical encumbrances. It is the owner's intention to provide a robust plan for planting for the enjoyment of residents and also along the interface with Victoria Avenue. Lighting. Lighting will also be reviewed during site plan as it is derivative of the building design and electrical layout. As per town standards, light trespass cannot occur onto adjacent properties. Light trespass will be managed through the use of dark sky compliant lighting, vertical cutoffs, fencing, and landscaping. Fire. Our fire route has been designed to meet OBC requirements and as preliminary proposed is satisfactory to the municipal fire department. In closing, we acknowledge the concerns of the neighboring residents and have done what we can at this stage of the development process to mitigate those concerns. The majority of the concerns I have cited will be reviewed and addressed through the site plan process in consultation with town staff and will inform the final detailed submission on this property. The allowance of a 4-story, 48-unit apartment building will provide additional housing supply and variety within the community, while contributing to required growth and intensification objectives of the municipality. It is our position that the proposed amendments will facilitate development that is appropriate for the site and should be approved. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Are there any questions from council? Seeing none, thank you.
Okay.
Our second delegation is Richard Goyet, speaking to item 8.1 PD 5219, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications by 1254349 Ontario Limited. Mr. Goyet. And just for those in the audience, apparently we have no TV over here, so this is your only option. So there are a few empty seats over here. If you can't see the TV, we apologize. Go ahead, Mr. Goyet.
Richard Goyet, G-O-Y-E-T-T-E. You've got it there. 3913 Rainbow Lane, Vineland. Got a simple presentation tonight, folks. On your screens are 2 pictures. The top picture is the Chateau Laurier in Ottawa. The picture at the top comprises 2 stages of development. 1912 approximately, and 1927. The owners of the building at that time felt it was appropriate to maintain a standard of design that was in harmony with the community, in harmony with the building itself. Chateau is a landmark building in Ottawa, stone's throw from Parliament's Hill, and in the foreground you see parkland. I want to get to the second picture because there's a linkage between that and what you people are trying to decide in this venture. What you see in the bottom picture, if you look closely, is the rooftop of the Chateau Laurier. At the bottom is not, as some people in Ottawa have described it, Trump's wall. It's not a seagoing container like you see on a freighter going across the ocean. And it's not the radiator on a car. These are all expressions people in the city of Ottawa have used to describe this hideous disfigurement of a community building. What you're looking at in the bottom foreground picture is a $120 million addition to a stately landmark. In the package put together by Upper Canada, we don't have the luxury of comparing two distinct projects. You have this colorful, cubic little elevational design of what Mayor Easton even questioned as being appropriate. I wish she were here tonight. I want to dwell on this hideous design in a community of residential low-rise buildings. They do include in their package, and you have it, that beautiful rendering of the apartment building. What they do not show is what's in this picture here on the screen that Barry Podolsky, a renowned architect in Ottawa, put together to make his argument to City Council. It doesn't show the Cherry Hill project. It doesn't show the houses in the background on Rittenhouse. It doesn't show the houses in the foreground. What has happened in Ottawa, and I'm fearful that this council is going down the same damn road. The circular firing squad in Ottawa has formed. The mayor is being attacked by council, council's attacking the staff are pointing fingers that it's not us, the electorate is up in arms. It's an unholy mess. The mayor's comment was, there was nothing we can do. I wish the mayor were here. I'd ask her, are you telling me that there's nothing we can do about this ill-conceived scheme? I hear from this council through the grapevine that you people are of the opinion that nothing can be done. I'd like to know from council, I would love to have known from the mayor, what exactly can you do to fight a hideous project like this that comes up? We know what the developer can do. You go to their website, Upper Canada, and the developer is very astute in hiring this company. They expedite plan development at its most critical step. They will, rather than sit back and awaiting results from often overworked bureaucracy, I guess that's the staff people here in the room, our planners will tenaciously follow through every phase of the review process to obtain the final reports, approvals. That's code to me, folks, that you're dealing with a slick operation, and it's to their credit. I don't demean them, I don't fault them, that's their raison d'etre. That's why they're hired. You people are up against a slick operation. You have a set of bylaws that you people approved. You've got an official plan that you approved. I'm sorry? Yeah. So think about the documents that you approved. As a member of the public, I find it difficult to understand why at each and every turn, when Upper Canada comes to your staff and suggests we need to amend, then what is the purpose of this meeting to have the public give opinions if there's nothing you can do? That's essentially my presentation, because I left a report at the last meeting that I planned to read. It was down to 5 minutes. I hope everyone did read it. My name and numbers there. I never got a call, so I guess everything was tickety-boo. You had no issues with what I said. But the speaker that's going to follow me has an excellent report. I couldn't have asked for better to represent the case against this project, and I hope you will seriously all consider it.
Thank you, Mr. Goyet. Are there any questions from council? Thank you. Our third delegation is Chris Jewsda. Speaking to item 8.1, PD 52-19, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications by 1254349 Ontario Limited. Mr. Jewsda, please come forward.
Congratulations on pronouncing my name correctly. A lot of people struggle with that. It's Chris Jewsda, Juzda. The address is 3958 Sunset Lane in Vineland. So I had, Mr. Rowe blew through that presentation really quickly. I didn't even catch most of what he was saying. So I had submitted this report to council, and I don't know if you all had a chance to read it. So I just wanted to basically summarize it. We find that we read the report that was presented by the planning people that looked at this development, and found it to be quite problematic. It does ignore existing zoning bylaws and does not take into consideration the strong opposition from hundreds of voting residents to this development. In addition, it also attempts to mitigate residents' concerns by commenting that the planning department will somehow protect the interests of adjoining property owners through site plan inspections, etc. The fact is that once the application is approved, the planning department has zero accountability to the residents. It's done. While they may stipulate that they can have some control, it's pretty apparent that they likely would not have a lot of control. So, first of all, we'd like council to keep in mind this is infill housing. So according to the report, the creation of new infill housing may be permitted provided the proposed lot and unit type and building height is similar to and compatible with the established character of the street or neighborhood concept where it was proposed. That's basically the wording in the report. As we know, the proposed development bears not even the slightest resemblance to any residential building within 10 kilometers of the proposed site, never mind the immediate surrounding area. Also, according to the report, intensification opportunities will be encouraged if, through the provision of detailed site plans, that such proposals will be respectful of, compatible with, and designed to be integrated with the existing character of the community or neighborhood where they are proposed. Again, it's ludicrous to propose that this proposed building adhere to that requirement. It simply does not. According to the report, the development will be characterized by quality landscaping. I'm basically, obviously, summarizing the report. The landscaping we referred to so far from what we've seen doesn't really exist. It's basically grass and a few shrubs. We're basically replacing a significantly sized green space with asphalt and a large building. The applicants have indicated that architectural details such as brick, stucco, composite cladding, glass balconies, cornices, and large window design are all being considered at this stage. So in actuality, nothing is certain and anything goes with no accountability to neighboring properties. I want to talk very briefly about the traffic study. The traffic study was done by the applicant. So we're wondering who vetted the traffic study, what the methodology that was used. I'll just give a quick example. If there's 66 parking lots in that building, if that building is occupied by younger working people with families, the results of the traffic study would be significantly different than if it were occupied by largely retired older residents. So I don't know how the study was vetted, and I think that has to be investigated. From the report, we're talking about minimum lot frontage required 30 meters. The proposed is 19 meters. That's a 30% deviation from the standard. And that essentially continues for a number of the specifications. The proposed development does not represent a built form. Sorry, I'm getting away from myself here. There are a number of deviations from the standard. So not only they're applying to for the rezoning, but they're also at the same time applying to deviate from that standard. Also, the height factor is an issue. The report I provided you gave a very simple illustration. Most of the residential buildings have a peaked roof which slopes away from adjoining properties. This is essentially a 42-foot high wall behind our property. It is not what I would say typical of the residences in the surrounding area. So in conclusion, the intensification seems to be the primary selling point of this development. The fact that Vineland is largely in the greenbelt is the reason many people live here. What is the value of intensification if it lowers the quality of life and property values for those living in the community? Intensification is meant to be an antidote to urban sprawl. Is urban sprawl a risk in Vineland? We presented a petition with over 240 resident signatures, and I just wanted to make a note that that was obtained in a very passive manner, non-aggressive, no door-to-door canvassing. Could have easily pulled it up to 400 signatures if we had done so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jewsda. I'm going to start, maybe, if you would stay at the microphone, just for a second. Mr. Bruder, would you, there's a couple things there that I picked up on. So the landscaping piece, talking about that, and also this traffic study vetting, would you speak to those two, please?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. So first of all, with respect to the landscaping, great to hear these comments for sure. Typically, what we look at when we're at the zoning stage, we don't necessarily get into the details of what specific plantings would be, but we look at the area in which the opportunity for those plantings would cover. In this case, for a landscaped component, they need to have 30%. They're proposing around 40 in this case. So at the zoning stage, that's what we look at. When we go to the next stage of planning approvals, which is a site plan process, that's when we would consider, and definitely take into account the comments received with respect to, privacy impacts, the need for plantings in certain areas that are most appropriate to ease that transition with existing residential, the clubhouse, what have you. And that's when we would further evaluate and work with the developer to make sure that those plantings are included. They have to be done to the satisfaction of the town. And basically, the same goes also for the design of the building. At this stage, that is a concept. It would be further refined through site plan as well. We've obviously heard loud and clear a lot of comments on the design of the building. But getting back to the site works a little bit, landscaping. It's not just enough to have the plantings and everything drawn on the drawings to the satisfaction of the town. That gets you site plan approval. But as construction occurs, we also hold back monies. We require letter of credit for things such as landscaping. And that ensures that when they are undertaking the site works, that they adhere to what the plan shows. We go out, we make sure that everything's in place as per the plan before those monies are released. So that is another measure of control we have with respect to landscaping. With respect to traffic, that is required as part of our processes to be done by a certified professional in that particular area of expertise. I don't have right in front of me who did it in this particular instance, but I could certainly find out. But I know that the traffic information reported during peak hour between 17 and 21 trips, those peak hours are in the morning, typically between 7 to 9, 4 to 6. I mean, there's going to be traffic coming and going at other points too. Not everybody's going to leave and show up at the same time. So that is something definitely to be considered, and something that is also I'd like to further clarify for you. But the peak times are typical in these types of traffic assessments, where it identifies when is the most traffic going to be entering and leaving the site. So.
Sure.
Mike, thank you. I understand what you're saying, and basically that was what was discussed before, but the question around traffic was more the qualification of the study itself and what methodology was used for that study. Simply from, I don't want to be argumentative, but different studies are going to show different things, and all traffic ingressing or egressing that building is coming across a sidewalk that's heavily trafficked by school children.
Okay, I'm going to put it out to council now for questions. Seeing no questions, we are now considering item 8.1, Report PD 52-19, Official Plan Amendment and Zoning Bylaw Amendment Applications by 1254349 Ontario Limited. Are there any questions from council with regards to the report? Seeing none, we have a motion. We now have a question. Councillor Robert.
Thank you, Chair McPherson. I was privileged to be part of a couple of meetings in the last couple of weeks with two parties, one along with CAO Kirkopoulos with the executive from Cherry Hill, as well as the applicant. And I just wondered if I could ask the CEO to comment or summarize maybe some of the thoughts of those meetings. Mr. CAO.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, and through the councillor, I think to those that are listening, as the councillor highlighted, we did have two meetings. One was with the executive of Cherry Hill, and we were actually given a guided tour by Mr. Jewsda and members of the executive, one that I think both Councillor Reimer and I enjoyed that morning. We had a lengthy conversation outside on the back patio, which really is the area that is, I think, going to be the most impacted by this proposed development. We talked about, I think, as Chris highlighted this evening, traffic. We talked about landscaping. We talked about some of the privacy issues that would result as a result of this building being constructed. We talked a little bit about shade, and we talked about sight lines. I think we heard very clearly and very passionately the desire to save as many trees as we could in that backyard or front yard, depending on how you looked at it, which help with some of that privacy that is currently in place. We took away those comments, and as we suggested to members of the executive, we did have a conversation with the developer who is here this evening, and I think highlighted a couple of things and a couple of desires that we as the municipality will have moving forward. And I heard some comments around the site plan approval process and what that looks like. That really is our leverage. There's a number of other things we can do, a number of other levers and processes we have in place before we grant any sort of permission. So I know the previous speaker highlighted if the mayor was here and others, what would they say or what would staff say in looking at a proponent, at a consultant that helps expedite processes and so forth. I think, you know, what we would say, or what I would say as the chief administrator advising council and speaking on behalf of the staff, is that we have an ability to work with developers in a multitude of ways. Yes, there's legislation and processes that we can be challenged on, but we do have a fairly big stick, I would characterize it that way, when we are granting approvals, and I don't say that tongue-in-cheek, I do say that with a level of seriousness, that when approvals are in place, whether they're site plan approvals that need to be granted, whether, as Mr. Bruder highlighted, the importance of securities that we keep in place. If things aren't at the level we think are appropriate and have been promised, then there are ways for us to make sure that absolutely happens. I can tell you things like landscaping are items that we discussed with the developer. There was a desire and a willingness to look at that. We talked about mature trees with Mr. Jewsda and members of the board, things that would help that aesthetic, that interface with the new development and the existing development. We talked about the look of the building. We talked about could the building change its orientation slightly. All things that can be worked out at site plan, but that would require ongoing negotiations. I know the developer did go away from that meeting that the councillor and I did have with him, suggesting he was going to talk to his consultant. He was going to look at potentially different orientations that specifically blocked out some of those sight lines and view issues that were highlighted to the both of us. So I leave that meeting not having anything firm for the developer. I can share that with everyone here, but definitely making it very clear as we move forward that there are a number of other processes and approvals that need to happen in order for us to get there. Again, I can't commit and promise wholeheartedly that the developer will adhere to those things, but there are things that we can definitely do in terms of where parking's located, how parking's situated, design, and a number of other things that we intend to work on very deliberately and very seriously moving forward. So that's a little bit of a summary through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor and his specific questions. The councillor may have a little bit more to add, but those are the notes that I took following those two meetings.
Thank you,
Councillor Robert?
CEO. Yeah, that would generally summarize our thoughts on the meetings. It was good to see both meetings were positive, and both meetings I think gave hope for common ground. I guess I'll summarize it like that. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no further questions, so I have a motion that council approve official plan amendment PL 0PA 201-90032 and zoning bylaw amendment application PL ZBA 201-80151 in the name of 1254349 Ontario Limited, subject to the following conditions. That the official plan amendment retain the medium density designation and include site-specific provisions to allow a building height of 4 stories and a maximum density of 82 units per hectare. That a H holding provision be placed on the zoning of the lands, and that the H holding provision not be removed until the applicant has entered into a site plan agreement and the agreement has been registered on title, and the applicant has submitted the letter of credit and cash payments required by the agreement. We will require a mover for the motion. Councillor Rajima? All in favor? We have 3, 4. Opposed? We have 1, 2. That is carried. Council considered all of the written and oral submissions and agrees with the planning report analysis and recommendations, and finds that, subject to the conditions of approval, this application meets the Planning Act criteria, is consistent with the provincial policy statement, and complies with the growth plan, the Niagara Region official plan, and the town official plan. We now move to presentations. We have one presentation this evening. Please note that presenters may speak for a maximum of 10 minutes. We have a staff presentation on item 8.2 PD 57-19, Prudhoe zoning amendment and draft plan of subdivision. Please come forward. Mr. Bruder, thank you. Yeah. Okay. We're going to have some opening comments by Mr. Karkopoulos.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to provide some opening comments as we deal with what is a very substantial and important milestone in the Prudhoe's development project that you've got before you. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the work of Ms. Shi and Mr. Bruder specifically in getting us to this particular point. There were definitely a number of other members of the senior management team that were involved in the process, but definitely a lot of that quarterbacking and shepherding of this project through really goes to Associate Director Bruder and our manager on this project, Ms. Shi. I just want to highlight a little bit of the process that we've gone on since the last time we were before you in terms of the approval in the secondary plan. And I'll start by saying that it has involved extensive communication, extensive engagement, consultation on a daily, if not weekly basis in terms of getting us to this point. Some deliberation, definitely a lot of views on all sides of this, trying to come to a place that we think we can be in front of council recommending what you see before you. And of course, negotiations, extensive negotiations over the last year to get us to this particular point. Matt will take you through the presentation. He will share with you, I think, in a brief way, where we've come, how far we've come, but I can tell you that in speaking with Melissa, who did lead a lot of those negotiations, I think what you see before you is something that is fair, is something that I think reflects what we heard from the community, reflects the consultation and engagement, and at the end of the day will be a project that we can all be proud of.
All right. Thank you, Mr. CAO. So, yeah, I mean, we're before you again. I know the title of this presentation says Prudham's Public Meeting, but this is the recommendation, very exciting times. Here we are now at the, close to the end of the draft plan of subdivision process, so I just wanted to run over a few key things with you. Just to recap the process further to what Mike said, I mean, this has been a very iterative process where we've had extensive community and stakeholder engagement. That continued throughout the secondary plan process into the draft plan. We had open houses, we had public information centers, public meetings, and all that has contributed to those collaborations and the toing and froing with the developer. We've also had a lot of consultation and a lot of outreach with the relevant agencies, MTO and PCA, the region, all playing a key role in this, all having a significant part to play, and lots of key input that went into this draft plan. So, should this be approved, the next steps will be to obviously continue the dialogue as we move kind of from this preliminary design standpoint into a more detailed design, into some of the more nitty-gritty work that will follow. So I'd just like to recap this particular clarification, just because I think it's important just to keep bringing it forward. So this draft plan, really what the purpose of draft plan is it's to identify just on a high level the blocks and where certain land uses are going to be, the streets, the open space network, things of that nature. And then zoning, which is also before you, the zoning amendment, is to get into more of the specifics for each block. You talk about things like lot coverage and setbacks and things like that. So that is the stuff that is before you today. At the public meeting, we didn't have anybody come up and speak, but we did get quite a bit of input from all of you. Some of the things we heard were just about some of the reduced density and some of the reductions in the heights that were seen in the version of the plan that got brought forward at the public meeting. It was brought up, could we look at possibly increasing that density and increasing the heights a little bit as per the original plan that was more conceived at the end of the secondary plan stage. We heard about the need to balance land uses, which is obviously a critical component of planning a development of this magnitude. You know, you've got your employment, commercial, and different forms of residential to provide those housing choices that are, you know, mentioned by many planning policies these days of being very important moving forward. We want to be able to develop a complete community where a person's able to potentially live, work, and age all in place. So very important consideration. And then another critical role is urban design. Now, I did mention we are at a preliminary design level of detail. So urban design, typically, we start to get into that much more when we get into the subdivision agreement process, which is the next step. But it's definitely a well-received comment as well. We want to make sure that the streetscape is vibrant. We want to make sure that it provides lots of variety, diversity in there, and it's very attractive, as we do see this area as a destination development. We heard about parking. We want to make sure that there's enough accommodation for parking, not just for the residents, but in recognizing this space, particularly the park, is going to be sought after as a destination as well. And then obviously the timing of the park, that being a critical priority, as well as, you know, you want people to have that amenity space when they start moving in there, when following, you know, building of their homes. So it's kind of hard to see here, but I can just generally go over it a little bit with the arrow here. I'll just kind of give you a quick recap. So along this area here, which is along the adjacent Victoria Shores existing community, we've got the drainage channel and walkway, minimum of 12 meters. Down by the water, it goes up to about 15 and change meters. All these here are single detached, a few townhouses in here, and we've made sure to keep that 7.5 meter setback here to make sure that we have as much of a transition as possible. 7.5 meter rear yard setback is very typical. That's our existing setback for residential uses for single detached. So we felt that was appropriate. Lower height here, so the max is 2.5. We've got some, a little bit higher in here, we've got some stacks, some stacks, some townhouses in here, a little higher, 3.5. Same goes in here. Then we've got some employment land over here, which going away from the public meeting and looking to balance land uses, we did add a little bit, reintroduce some back into that area. In here is our larger scale commercial where the unit sizes are a bit larger, with some smaller commercial units in here, envisioning more of like that smaller shop, boutique style places that you would see or you would like to see down the Main Street corridor. I lost my arrow. Where am I? And then we move in here. This is the park space. You can see in here there's kind of a more, and I know it's very hard, but there's a more active piece here where you might have your play structures, your splash pad. I don't know, those details haven't been worked out yet. They will be coming as well. But that would be outside of, you know, where the erosion setback is. Within the erosion setback, there might be some of those parklands in there. There will be, but there'll be a lot more passive. We foresee just kind of more of a open field bench, scenic type variety. Although that'll all be confirmed as we move forward. And then moving further to the east, we get into, this is where the density and the heights start increasing. You've got, where are we here? We got some stacked townhouses here, 4 stories around there. Those are typically more apartment style dwellings. We call them stacked townhouses, but a little more oriented towards that apartment style. Then we've got a higher building here, reintroduced, 8 stories with a parking garage here. We go higher here, up 12, 15 stories throughout here. 8 stories in here as well, with some townhouses and then some singles in front. And then we have our 18 stories over here. So just to, again, recap, I mentioned some of them, but just to go over them again. Some of the changes that have been made since the public meeting. Reintroduction of the mid-rise apartments on the east side. Those took over for some of the townhouses that were proposed. Now there are some mid-rises, i.e. 8-story buildings reintroduced. The introduction of the stacked townhouses, kind of more of an apartment style as well, a little more dense than your typical, or more of a compact built form, I'd rather say, than your typical street or block towns. An overall increase in number of units. At the public meeting, the unit count was just under 1,200. Now it's gone up again to 15 and change. That would be excluding the one piece of MTO lands there where there's the 15-story buildings proposed. So the density is back up to where it was envisioned at the secondary plan stage. Again, like I mentioned before, reintroduction of an additional employment building. That was an example of some of the negotiations, the collaborating with the developer who agreed to add this back in as planning thought it was a good idea just from a balance of land use perspective. And then one other thing to note is the reduction in the number of accesses off the North Service Road. This was a result of input from MTO, the region, our public works staff, and even planning as well, just with respect to traffic flows and what's anticipated and what was identified as working best. So some of the plan highlights, Waterfront Park and Trail that we envision, the trail going along the waterfront, providing a kind of a connected space along the development, a range of land uses. So I feel that we've balanced our land uses very well. Variety of housing options in there. We've got commercial and mixed use unit sizes of varying types and locations. Some office opportunity as well. Consideration of vegetation replanting. I know in that concept plan that I just showed you, that plan, there's quite a few plantings you see in there. There's also, staff are looking to work with Brock to identify some plantings that would be of benefit, not only from just a canopy perspective, but even maybe managing stormwater and providing aesthetic treatment in the streetscapes. So that's something that is going to be ongoing as we proceed to detailed design. And then incorporation of some zoning provisions that, that really try to hone in on that varied and attractive street interface, such as setting the garages back a little bit, avoiding extremely long block lengths, and even building wall lengths, with breaking them up a little bit, whether it be through architectural control or simple measured size, and obviously glazing as well. So some of the key issues, traffic flow considerations. So we've had quite a bit of collaboration. We also brought in a third-party consultant to review the traffic impact assessment that was submitted. Resulted in some updates to that traffic study. And basically what it concluded is that for the first phase, there might be some minor turn taper improvements and addition of turns at the South Service Road in Victoria, for instance, but no major improvements needed. And it looks at kind of a phasing out. And as we continue to proceed, as the build-out continues to proceed, there'll be a monitoring aspect to make sure that traffic flow continues to operate as forecasted, to make sure the improvements that are identified moving to full build-out are still appropriate as we move forward. Interfaces with existing residential, I think I've touched on that. And servicing with respect to sanitary water and storm, we know those improvements are required. They're in their detailed design stage as we speak. So some tentative timelines. You have the draft plan approval and zoning bylaw amendment approval recommendation before you now. Should that be approved, we would proceed probably later this year, I would imagine, to initiating the subdivision agreement stage, which is, like I said, more detailed design and a lot more collaboration with agencies, town departments, developer. Some of the pre-grading and shoreline protection works later on this year as well. And then moving into 2020 and 2021, that's when we would see the servicing upgrades being completed. There is still some consultation with the region with respect to nailing down the exact scheduling of those, but we know it'll be around there. And the developer might be looking at installing some of the pre-servicing infrastructure, but that's all to be confirmed as we move forward as well. So just in closing, should these recommendations be approved, they'll be subject to a 20-day appeal period. We're looking to establish an internal liaison working group to provide opportunity for further dialogue to engage council on some matters with respect to urban design as we go through the subdivision agreement process. Just due to how important this development is and wanting to make sure that that communication and collaboration continues throughout. And then as we move forward, there's meeting the conditions of approval, which were before you in the report. I don't want to go over them. There's a fair number of them. And then we proceed with the subdivision agreement, final approval and registration. And then after that, there will be there will be for sure further plans of condominium site plan processes that pertain to each specific area. And then finally, building permits. So that's my quick, or maybe not so quick, run through. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them with Mike and Melissa as well.
I think what we'll do, Mr. Bruder, is that we'll carry on with the presentations, and then during the report, we'll just take all the questions during the report. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. So we will now consider delegations with respect to PD 5719 Prudhoe zoning amendment and draft plan of subdivision. Please note that each delegation may speak for a maximum of 5 minutes. We have one registered delegation, John Arians from IBI Group, speaking to item 8.2 PD 5719 Prudhoe zoning amendment and draft plan of subdivision. Mr. Arians.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of committee, ladies and gentlemen. Both Angela and I will be doing the presentation, so perhaps we get a little bit more than 5 minutes. we'll do our
Well,
best to stay within the
we-
timeline.
We will ask council if that is of favor to council. Please, in favor? You have more than 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. It's our pleasure to be here this evening. I thought of a good opening line on the way here, and I was going to say this isn't the finish line, folks, and it's not even the starting line. Where are we in the process? And we're right where we should be in the process. I mean, you've undertaken a secondary plan. We were heavily involved in the secondary plan, as was the public. You adopted that secondary plan, and we came right away with an application for draft plan and zoning. Tonight, hopefully, you will grant those permissions, and then we can get on with the real fun stuff of actually doing the detailed design and working with architects and landscape designers and creating a park and creating a streetscape. So it's not the finish line that we're at tonight. It's not the starting line. We're about to have some really serious design exercises in front of us, and this is really where the fun stuff happens. As I indicated, the secondary plan was adopted last year. Shortly after that, we filed the draft plan. We had the statutory public meeting in 6 months, and that's a milestone. When we had a public meeting, and just to give you an idea, council may remember, no one spoke at the statutory public meeting because your staff had done such a wonderful job of public engagement. The open houses we had, the open house that the developers had that we sponsored. You know, we dealt with the public issues right from day one, and as a result, there wasn't any delegations at your statutory public meeting. And here it is, July 15th, with a recommendation for draft plan approval. Now, Angela and I work in many other municipalities, larger municipalities, Hamilton, Burlington, Oakville, St. Catharines. Any of those municipalities would be hard-pressed to have an 80-acre, 1,700-unit subdivision draft approval and zoning ready in 9 months. So kudos to Mr. Kirkopoulos, to Mr. Bruder, to Ms. Shee. You guys have done a wonderful job, and thank you very much. This is the development team that IBI had put together with the owners group. Significant expertise in noise, environmental issues, shoreline protection, transportation planning, hydro-G, you name it, a plethora of experts all putting together and working on a comprehensive development plan. This, of course, is the secondary plan that this municipality approved. I refer to that image in the middle as the butterfly, and the butterfly was our guiding factor. We had the different colors, the wing spread, the road pattern, and as a result of that secondary plan, our butterfly looks very similar to what this council has approved. Mr. Bruder did an excellent job going over the details of the plan that is before you. We won't follow that, but rest assured, a significant amount of design, a significant amount of engineering and transportation work has gone into making this butterfly actually work and fly. Now, when we did attend the statutory public meeting, there was a concern, not by the members of the public, as I indicated, but by this council. You said, hey, Arians, we want more density. We want more units on this project. So we came back and we revisited the east end, and on the two circles there, the density was increased. And we've gone from about 1,200 units to about 1,700 units. That's a significant amount of additional growth. And we do recognize that Prudhome's is going to be your primary growth area as this municipality continues moving forward. You also said you wanted to see more employment lands. And the beauty of Prudhome's is that it really will be a complete community. We have all types of residential accommodations. We have open space, passive open space, active open space. We have a full range of commercial uses, and we have employment uses. So from that standpoint, this is the perfect example of a complete community that the province has certainly been advocating. This is what's before you today. It's the draft plan of subdivision, and all it is simply doing is it's cookie cutting the lotting fabric and the blocks. Those blocks will then be subject to a zoning bylaw amendment, and that sets the broad permissions within which we then go to the next stage, which is the detailed engineering design. So that's what's before you today, a request to divide the property into various blocks and parcels. There's also a phasing plan before you, and you'll note that the Waterfront Park, if I can use the arrow, I can't really see it on my, oh, there it is. The Waterfront Park is outlined in a white color. That, of course, is going to be dedicated right from day one as part of the first registration. So you will have your Waterfront Park at the outset. And, you know, I look forward to working with the municipality on the subdivision agreement, and let's develop that park right off the bat, because it's to our clients' interest to attracting home buyers into this development, and it's in your interest to have the park ready to go. So I see some synergies there in working together and creating a wonderful waterfront facility right off the bat. This is the zoning that's being applied for. There are different colors, different zonings that provide us with the land use permissions. Where can we build townhouses? Where can we build singles? What type of commercial uses are envisioned? And what are the employment uses? Rest assured that the employment will be a prestige type of employment, no outdoor operations, no outdoor storage, no smelting, no forge hammers, none of that. It's prestige industrial that we're trying to create here. And the residential provides that full range of housing and accommodations. What's really driving the bus here is not so much the zoning, but it's going to be your design guidelines, the urban design. It's the built form, it's the look, it's the feel of this community that's going to be so important. And that's why we spent a lot of efforts working with the urban design aspects. Now I'm going to turn it over to Angela at this point. She's going to give you an overview of some of the previous visual slides that we used on this project. Ange?
Hello, everyone. So back when it was the secondary plan process, council told us to, present a visual of what we want and our vision for this. So we had completed a 3D visualization, and this was the pick points that you could land on to see what would look like that. I'll touch on a few of them. As you can see, this concept is outdated from the secondary plan, and what you will see is, although we did change some aspects of the plan, a lot of our many important aspects still remain within our design concept. So this was our entrance feature from Street A and the North Service Road. This is to function as our primary access into the subdivision, and we'll have gateway features to signify that this is the entrance into the Prudhoe subdivision. We are looking for, separated entrance and exit lanes to try and define that entrance more, and as well, a marquee sign was our gateway feature of choice, as opposed to a wall or plantings, which is the usual item chosen for a gateway feature. Not only will it be a bit different, but also be visual from the highway, but also kind of give that nod to the history that is with Prudhoe's. This is our Main Street corridor, which has not changed as well. We want to implement, obviously, an eclectic and vibrant mix between the building designs, between a traditional and modern look, not only to provide that aesthetically pleasing visual, but also to create that destination place. Our concept portrays large pedestrian sidewalks, narrow vehicular lanes, so that this will calm traffic. As well, we also would request a reduced speed limit along this way. We are proposing removable bollards for on-street parking in the winter and patios in the summer, and basically implementing buildings to the lot line of the street to make that more pedestrian feel. All of this will help create that sense of place and that sense of a destination point within the heart of the subdivision. So this was our waterfront design, which at the time was very bare bones. In talking through our meetings with the town, we've gotten an idea as to what kind of amenities they are looking for. There'll be those incorporated into the town design, as well as, potential lookouts, more greeneries. The trails will still be separated from the vehicular lanes, and we'll also incorporate a naturalized beach within our shore protection design. And this is the interface between the existing Victoria Shores subdivision and our low-density development. There is currently an existing drainage channel that runs along the property line of Victoria Shores. That is to remain. We will be incorporating more plantings within this, as well as separation with a multi-use trail to add to the buffer of the between the interface of the existing residents and our proposed development. So at our previous design during the secondary plan, we created a SketchUp model to kind of show the gradation of the building heights. The town requested that we do a second one to reflect our changes of the plan. Due to timing, we didn't get to provide as much detail as we did with the first one, but we tried to still incorporate the essentials. So I'll try and point out everything. Over here is the Victoria Shores subdivision. So here we have directly south of it is the townhouses, and along here is the low-density development, which may be a mixture of singles, towns, and semis. Along the waterfront is our singles, and then we have townhouses over here, which go into stacked townhouses. Our Main Street corridors down here. Our employment area is, if you can see my cursor over here, right beside our commercial block. And then we have to the east is the townhouses that go into stacks, and then high-density mid to high-density apartments. With the same over here, we have singles, standard towns, a mid-rise apartment building, and then high-rise, and our landmark tower over here. So with that, we also created 3 vantage points to show the gradations of the height and how they will look. Our view 1 is at the easterly portion of the property. And as you can see, we have the 2.5 singles along here, which go into the 3-story standard townhouses, and then 8-story mid-rise, and then high-density 15 stories. As well here, we have 3-story standard townhouses, 4-story stacks, 8-story mid-rise. And so our gradation from the lake to North Service Road will do a gentle increase. Our second view is looking straight down into the Main Street corridor. Along the waterfront, we propose a maximum of 6 stories, and 5 stories are also represented within Main Street. And as you can see, we have low-density 2.5-story singles with 3-story towns and our 4-story stacks. And this side I did describe, so you're basically getting towards the North Service on the east and west side, a low from the lake and gradually moving higher towards the highway. And then our final view is located at the northeast portion of the property line. So just along the lake, looking easterly to what we would say over here is our landmark tower. So over here, this gray area is the existing Victoria Shores subdivision. To the south of them is our 2.5-story towns, as well as our low-density 2.5-story development here. The townhouses to the south will also rise to 3 stories, and then our employment use will have a maximum height of 5 stories. And then as you can see, moving easterly, we will rise from 3 stories to 4, 5 to 8, going from west to east, and also the 2.5 to 3 to 4, so rising from the waterfront to the North Service Road. So that's it for me, and I'll hand it back over to John.
Thank you. If you consider the height and the density kind of like a wedding cake, we have Victoria Shores, and then we step up as we go along the shoreline, and then we have the North Service Road, and we step down as we get closer to the lake. So we've got that gradation happening in two different forms to create that compatibility and to create that sense of place. During the processing of the draft plan, I think the three most important factors are listed on this screen. Transportation was key, and Mr. Bruder provided you with an overview, and the staff report summarizes, you know, we're going to be monitoring the traffic, and not all the traffic improvements are going to be required at the outset, but as the traffic increases, different roads will be designed and added, and traffic lights and turning lanes, all of that will be incorporated, not only to your satisfaction, but to the region and to the MTO satisfaction as well. Throughout the transportation component, we also included active transportation, the cycling, the pedestrian activity, on-site circulation, and safety were key components. From a servicing perspective, of course, 1,700 dwelling units is a lot of water, it's a lot of sewage use, and there are upgrades going to be required. And one of the main themes we heard from our friends at Victoria Shores were, since you're going to be upgrading our pumping station, come in and do it quickly, and when you rebuild the road, you know, do it at the least amount of disturbance as possible. So that's going to be one of the key requirements as the servicing infrastructure gets improved. The provision of open space and parks was the third critical component. You're going to end up with 9 acres of a wonderful waterfront park. It's going to be a fully connected community with 1 kilometer of shoreline and 1 kilometer of trail right along the water's edge. And we're creating a civic square. So from Main Street, you've got 2 main anchors. You've got the lake on one end with a waterfront park, and at the other end, closer to the North Service Road, you've got this civic square. Just imagine closing that street in 5 years' time from now and having a street festival to celebrate, you know, Strawberry Festival like we have here in Lincoln, or something along those lines. So it's going to be a wonderful venue for these residents and for the entire town. So that really concludes our presentation. Again, our thanks to staff for working with us on this project. We look forward to the next steps. As I said, this is not a finish line, it's not the start line, but it's the beginning of something really exciting, and we're pleased to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, John and Angela. And we're, if you wouldn't mind staying right where you are, we're going to move to the report. So we are now considering item 8.2, PD 5719, Prudhoe zoning amendment and draft plan of subdivision. So we will start with questions from council. Councillor Regima.
Thank you, Chair McPherson. I have a question about, so got the numbers of how this is, the developments. First of all, thank you very much for the presentation, and all of the renderings that you showed really help a lot to be able to picture how the development is going to play out in the long run is very helpful. And the phasing, so it's proposed that phase 1 is the west end by Victoria Shores. Then we go to phase 2, which is toward the east end, which is blocks 7 and 8 and et cetera over there. And then phase 3 is to the west again. And then so the mixed use is proposed to be phase 4. So I think I understand the point of that. But could you explain, for my benefit and maybe for some others, why some of the commercial and the mixed use is further down the road in the phasing? And then I have another question after that, if you don't mind.
Certainly, through the chair, it comes down to the fact that there's a limited commercial market there today. We only have Victoria Shores. So in order to build Main Street and to have a restaurant and a bistro, you have to have a population base. So we need the residential component to drive the commercial components. So that's why the main commercial area, which is down here, shows as required. So as the market unfolds, I mean, we expect the Tims and the Subways and possibly the gas bar to start right away. But a grocery store isn't going to start until we have that population base. Main Street, the commercial uses aren't going to start until we have that population base. So, you know, it's not build it and they will come. First they have to come, then you can build it.
Okay, thank you. So further to that, I have one more question, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair. Okay, when I look at the phasing plan, the site statistics block says that there's some mixed use proposed for phase 1. Says it right in the phase 1 title, in the block there. So, but I see that phase 1 is blocks 14, 16, 17, and 19, and I don't see any mixed use in there. So is that just a bit of an error or an oversight, or is there actually some mixed use?
No, I think
Proposed for phase
what
one.
that means is that, you know, perhaps the Tims and some of the highway commercial uses on the larger commercial block will be phased in. I mean, those are existing uses that we have to replace, and I think those will be brought in. Ange, did you have anything else?
I do think there was just a little oversight. What was at the, trying to see with my cursor here. This area in the beginning was just highlighted by accident. And so what I think happened here was the site statistics weren't updated. So they included this block, just that unit, which is a mixed-use building. And so it was just an error on our part to eliminate the mixed use from phase 1.
Okay, thanks very much, that makes sense.
Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the presenters. I appreciate hearing the cooperation that's gone on throughout the process. I think that's a compliment to staff and to yourself as well, to be able to cooperate and to expedite a project of this manner so quickly. The questions I have is with regards to phasing as well. I feel as though, me personally, I think there's a shortage of accommodations with regards to hotels, with regards to boutique, short-term accommodations. Where does that fall in on this plan as far as providing hotels or that sort of accommodation?
Okay. Through the chair, if we look at Main Street here, one of the first slides that Angela prepared showed the entrance coming in here, and right beside it, this is where a boutique hotel would be envisioned, and the zoning permits it, and that's where that Prudham's Marquee sign was at. So that's actually one of the land use permissions for that block. It's identified as the phase that is phase 5, but again, it'll be market driven, sir. So if the market is there, you know, all the phases can be adjusted slightly, but again, we don't want to build buildings and have them empty. We want vibrancy, we want uses.
And through you to the chair, this is you know, the concern I have is that the servicing of the whole project would facilitate a quicker, should that demand happen sooner than later, we would be able to facilitate that in a quicker amount of time, or should the market demand it sooner than anticipated?
So through the chair again, Main Street here is phase 1.
Okay.
So this road will be built right from the get-go. So if this block of land for a hotel was ready, even in phase 3 or phase 2, the road is there, the services are there, and it can accommodate it. So, you know, there's flexibility in the implementation.
And if I may, one more question. Sure. The final phase, what exactly is that proposed? What is the thought of that final phase? And where does that fall roughly timeline-wise?
So the final phase being the block here, which we refer to as the vertical forest, the Bosco Vertical, the landmark building, as Ange has called it. You know, it really depends on the marketing again, and that is an isolated block. It's separated from the rest of Prudence by the valley and the creek entering the lake. It could go at any time, really, because it is a separate block, and services, you know, are being extended along the North Service Road to accommodate it. So from that standpoint, it is virtually a separate block that could be ready to go at any time. But because it's such a landmark building, the owners wanted to, you know, to unveil it and do it closer to the end of the project.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir.
Councillor Brunet. I lost you.
I'll switch off.
Hang on. Councillor Russell, you're going to have to come back in. Okay, thank you. We got Councillor Brunet.
Thank you, Chair McPherson. Through you to the presenters, thank you very much. Like you've already mentioned, you've listened to some of our concerns. I'm really glad to see that the units has increased from 1173 to 1559. And, you know, every time we talk about a development, the first thing that's on everybody's tongue is parking spaces. And you've increased that, if my numbers are correct, by 140,
Probably, yes.
2149 to 2289. So thank you for that. Glad to see that. A number of questions, Mr. Chair. So one of our biggest issues that we're facing as a municipality, other than cannabis, is climate change. And at our last meeting, our Community Services and Infrastructure, we asked staff to declare a disaster relief for municipal funding for a state of emergency along our lakeshore roads, Charles Daly Park. You include in your package Novus for wind studies. Has there anything to date come from that wind study that we should be concerned about in this development?
Through the chair, the wind study was commissioned because of the very unique microclimate here for fruit. And we have, you know, vineyards and orchards to the south of us. And the thought was, if we put up these high rises, are the winds now going to be affected so that the peach blossoms get frosted out or what have you? And the study concluded that, you know, there's enough separation that really this development, and that was one of the reasons we oriented the street slightly different to what the secondary plan showed, was because of that accommodating, you know, no change to the wind patterns. So from that standpoint, there should be no impact from this development on the tender fruit source or the microclimate that's involved. With respect to climate change, I'm really pleased to indicate this development, right from the get-go in the secondary plan, there's no stormwater management ponds here, right? So what happens when it rains and all this water runs off? Typically, it's collected in a basin, it warms up, it then gets discharged into a receiving stream, whether it's a lake or a body of water, and that's the old school. What we're actually doing is we're capturing that rainfall, we're putting it into the ground as quickly as possible, we're cooling it off, and then slowly releasing it. We've worked very closely with your engineering staff, developing these low-impact development standards for engineering. Something called a Silva cell is basically a plastic box filled with soil and other water-absorbing components that will collect the stormwater, and we also plant trees in these Silva cells. What sold us on the Silva cells is when you see a tree planted in a normal boulevard being, you know, 3 meters high and kind of scraggly, versus the same tree in a Silva cell being 7 meters high and vibrant. So you get kind of that instant canopy growth. You've got your trees healthy and maintained. All of that lowers the temperature. All of that helps the microclimate. So we're trying to create a very sustainable development project here with the incorporation of these LID components, and your staff have been wonderful to work with.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Arians. I'm really pleased to hear that, and that's why I asked the question, because it is a big concern for us in the municipality. So it's great to hear that we're not doing the same old thing. And that we're looking outside the box, and, you know, that we're putting our money behind, you know, behind what we're doing. And, you know, that we're looking at, you know, sustainability and green energy and all these things. So I appreciate you making that comment. Through you, Mr. Chair, if I could just proceed with a couple other questions. So the Waterfront Park, like the number, you know, in your chart in terms of block 12 speaks to 39,194 square meters, which I believe I read somewhere in the report is just under 4 hectares. Is that correct?
3.92 hectares.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, you referred to the Waterfront Park, if I'm not mistaken, for clarification, as being 9 acres.
Yes.
So I want to keep going back to earlier dialogue we had months down the road, where we referred to, you know, this EC zone, this environmental,
Okay.
and you referred and we referred, and it's music to our ears that this will maybe be like Spencer Smith Park in Burlington.
Exactly.
So I just want to,
Yeah.
you know, go along with that thought process for a second, that, you know, we've got a tremendous amount of erosion control that needs to be done, like at Lake Ontario, and that is going to be done, through you, Mr. Chair, by the developer. Can you just confirm that?
I can, yes, that'll be a condition of draft plan approval, that we have to build shoreline protection.
So at the end of the day, when that is done, the grades are such that, as you alluded to, this is 9 acres. It's not really 3.94 hectares. It's really 9 acres of what we're calling Waterfront Park.
Through the chair, if you're familiar with Spencer Smith Park, they have like a concrete seawall, okay? And then the grassy knoll starts up to Lakeshore Road. Now, about 40 meters from that seawall is the magic line called hazard land. Everything from the hazard land to the seawall is hazardous. But when you're at the Rib Fest or the Jazz Festival, you don't know if you're on the hazard land or not on the hazard land. It makes no difference because it's that grass going right to the water's edge or to the concrete wall. The park and prudence will be the same. Instead of a concrete wall, however, it'll be a wall of riprap and armor stone. And then the grade will gradually go up to the waterfront promenade. And somewhere there will be that magic line that this is hazard land, but for all intent and purposes, when you're standing there, it's a wide open grassed area. You know, I'm gonna say maybe 10 acres, maybe 11 acres all told. There will be a waterfront promenade, and there'll be the sidewalk and the bike path closer to the road as well. And then all this space is available for use. It's gonna be a huge asset.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, because I think that's really important, that we know what we're getting and what we can look forward to in terms of, you know, events. And I mean, this will become a destination. And yes, we have Charles Daly Park, but this will be something, and I love the idea that Angela pointed out, you know, those bollards on Main Street are going to be removable. So, you know, what we see in the summertime will be very different in the wintertime, where we're going to allow cars to access that, and there'll be a parking down there to get to that area. So I think that's brilliant. Through you, Mr. Chair, if I could just ask one additional question. I believe the last meeting, we had some concerns with the people of Victoria Shores about block 20, which is referred to as a culvert, a channel, and I believe there was a view shown, and I forgot about that completely until late this afternoon, where it was pointed out to me. And I wonder if you could possible to bring up that view where it shows that vegetation and it shows a bridge going through that area. I wonder if you could bring that up.
So the bridge is actually over at the east end of the site, where we have a waterfront trail coming this way, a bridge over the creek to get to the Bosco Vertical.
Okay, could you bring that up?
It's not on our PowerPoint.
Okay.
It's on previous PowerPoints.
Okay.
Yeah, you can see on the graphic here, the key map, this is the bridge area.
Right.
Spanning the creek, outletting to the lake, and it just connects the waterfront trail across here to the residents who are going to be here, and it'll continue to the service road and then off to the lake house and other properties easterly.
And that's still in the
Yes, sir.
in the report as we move forward and come with final design?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have no further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Pachariva?
Thank you, Chair McPherson. Through you to John and Angela, thank you very much for the presentation. Just a few questions I have. Really appreciate that the Waterfront Park is going to go in first. I think it's a selling point for the development, and I think it goes a long way to framing it as something different. So I really appreciate that. Question, though, with respect to that, Councillor Brunet went along that line, is in the original iterations, and I remember this, it's stuck in my head, is that, and it might stretch from Jordan Road to Victoria, is that the waterfront promenade would be the same as the beaches in Toronto, or the stretch along there, but in the report was talked about a kilometer. So wondering what the differentiation is.
So through the chair, the Prudence project only has a kilometer of shoreline.
Okay,
So we're going from the west to the east.
okay,
That's as far as we can take it.
okay, perfect.
Okay.
And then the rest is on us.
You got it.
Thank you. With respect to the phased-in traffic updates, happening every 5 years. So wondering if, along with the phasing that Councillor Michalak asked, could this be accelerated? Because it's going to cause consternation every 5 years. There's going to be upheaval, we're going to add a lane, we're going to ask for signalization. Wondering if it's not better to do it all at once and be done with it, rather than this approach.
So yes and no. You
Okay.
also have to understand, sir, that traffic improvements have to be warranted, right?
yeah.
And if they're not warranted, people ignore them. So if you're putting in a traffic light before it's needed, a lot of people are gonna run that light.
Okay.
And that's not safe. So
No.
yes, they will be monitored. As phases come on stream, maybe the traffic background has changed and we need to accelerate and bring other infrastructure in place earlier.
Yeah.
So, you know.
And then, you know what, the converse applies. You've not ingrained that behavior
Correct.
in the people there, and then institute the light. Well, that's not for me. So, yeah.
The worst thing you can do is put up a four-way stop when it's not warranted,
Yeah.
because everyone's gonna run it, and
Okay.
that is not safe.
Councillor Padri, Mr. Bruder has a comment to make.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add to that, just that this monitoring too, I mean, there have been some improvements identified already. So that exercise has been done. It's just making sure as the build-out proceeds that those that are identified remain appropriate. There might be other factors at play as the development occurs, as build-out continues to happen, that need to be considered as well. So that's another aspect, just a matter of due diligence as we move forward.
No, that's fantastic. And I appreciate the increase in the heights, the increase in the density, the increase in the parking, the institution of the bike parking.
Yes.
I think it's brilliant. And yesterday, and I don't know if this is happenstance, it's kismet or whatever, but we got off the highway coming back from Aurelia yesterday, and there was a development that speaks of townhouses, frontage on the public road with access from a rear lane. I thought these were brilliant. It opened up the whole streetscape,
Yes, it does.
and it's here in the report.
Yeah.
So you gave me goosebumps when I was reading this last night, wondering where those might occur.
So, can we go to the concept, Angie? You wanna point out where they are currently?
So if you look at over where my cursor is along here, this is one type of area that we're having closer to the street.
Okay.
And they'll come in the back and park in the rear as well. These stacked townhouses, their front yards are in the middle. So they share like the courtyard, that will be their main entrance with parking located in the rear. So this is more functioning like a laneway to people's garages, as well as on this side as well.
Okay. And my final question through you, Mr. Chairman, and again, I appreciate the acknowledgement about garages are to be used for parking. How ironclad is that? Can we take that to the bank, or? I would hope so.
Through the chair, the city of Hamilton is updating their zoning bylaws. They still have Stony Creek, Flamborough, Dundas, you know, the old bylaws. And they've done the industrial zones, the open space zones. They're working on the residential zones now, and they are actually putting that in the bylaws.
Okay,
So it's enforceable at your discretion.
if it's there, okay,
Right. If it's
Terrific.
not there, it's not enforceable.
okay, thank you.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the presenters, thanks, excuse me, very much for the presentation. I think the visuals really do kind of bring life to the project. I just have a couple quick questions. One is concerning the active transportation. We have a very busy waterfront trail that you know passes right along that North Shore or North Service Road. How, if you could speak a little bit to how that will be encapsulated in development. You've mentioned a few times about, again, the need for active transportation. I see this as being a destination or a stopway for people that are going to be riding by. Again, pausing or stopping in that park. So just wondering how they would be getting to that location, and is it going to be as open and welcoming for outside riders, not necessarily just residents?
So if, through the chair, on the concept plan, where the cursor is now at the west end, we have that trail or that bikeway coming in along the service road, and that continues along the service road for the entire length of the project. In addition, from this point here, the trail will take you inside the development all the way up here, and then you can also follow the waterfront trail, cross the bridge or not, come out this way, or cross the bridge and come out this way. So you have the choice of either continuing along the service road if you're in a hurry to get to wherever, or if you're just on a Sunday afternoon, you can ride your bike in and visit Prudham's Landing.
Okay. So that will be for both walking and riding?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What's the width on them?
3 meters, 10 feet.
Okay. My other question is, again, this is very, very pie in the sky, but what would be the best possible completion date for the entire project?
So, here we are, 2020, the shovel goes in the ground. I would say 8 years, 10 years possibly.
Okay.
Joanna's pointing 5, so they're obviously a lot more anxious, and maybe it will be 5, so let's say 5 to 8 years. Oh, 5, 5, 10.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Timmers.
Chair McPherson. Thank you very much for the presentation, and, you know, I think most of my questions have been answered, but I do still have some concerns around the parking. For the block townhouses, stacked townhouse, we're actually decreasing the parking from 2 spaces to 1.25 spaces. So I guess what my concern is, where are those second cars gonna go?
Through the chair, the reason we've done that is that this form of development is very, very now more similar to apartments than they are townhouses. And for Mr. DeSantis, we did that project just in downtown Beamsville, stacked townhouses with small apartment units. Some of those units are only 500 square feet, some are 600 square feet, and they're one-bedroom units. So from that standpoint, having 2 parking spots seemed to be an oversupply. And the secret here is you want to be able to balance your parking needs with the type of development. You don't want to have more parking spots, you don't want to have less. And just based on previous similar type projects in similar environments, the slight reduction in parking seems to be that appropriate balance.
I guess my concern is if the extra cars are all on the roads, when someone wants to come to our beautiful lakefront park, where will they park?
So the reality is that the extra cars are not there. They're just, you know, they appeal to the 1-car household, the 1-bedroom type of unit is what's available. And what we find is that, you know, the market takes care of itself from a parking standpoint. Yes, we have, you know, holidays and Mother's Day when, you know, we all run out of parking. But for all intent and purposes, if a couple with 2 cars was looking to buy a condo unit, they're not going to buy a condo unit with only 1 parking spot available for them. You know, they're either going to get rid of one of their cars or they're going to buy a unit elsewhere where there is more parking.
Well, I would hope that, or they might decide that they're gonna find a spot on the street.
Well,
Will there be any designated parking for the beach front, lakefront?
the
If someone's
concept
coming
plan
down there?
does, Ange, do you want to show the two parking areas? And again, this is conceptual.
So this is a concept plan that we presented to the town just for, amenities that they wanted to see. And over here is one parking area, and then here is the second parking area. We also are proposing on-street parking along the waterfront side. So yeah, there is that accounted for. Obviously, we'll figure out the numbers when the more detailed design comes into play.
I think that's what I was looking for, was those parking areas. I think I wasn't seeing them, so thank you for that. I'm happy to see that, because, you want people to have access. This was priority to the community, so thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think Matt is also got a comment to this.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on the parking a little bit. Yeah, with respect to the stacked townhouses, typically, yeah, a little bit more smaller unit type, the apartment style is kind of where that particular housing option lends itself to. That's something we collaborated with, we negotiated with, and we came up with a mutually agreeable solution. We also included a visitor component in there too, which we don't have in our existing zoning bylaw as it is. With respect to parking in general, I mean, I think that's definitely something that we've considered as we've gone through. It's very important. There's other, this whole development is designed to be walkable. So, I mean, a lot of the parking spaces that you see over in the employment area, well, those are gonna, those are typical 9 to 5 type office style or other employment use styles. That's when the hours of operation will generally be. So, there's definitely going to be some flexibility there to be able to accommodate some visitors. There is some envisioning of some public parking on either side of the park, potentially parking lots there. There's on-street parking in various locations, and even there is some provisions in the high density, the apartment uses for some public parking provisions as well. Whether they're for a fee or not a fee, that's some flexibility that we've incorporated into it as well, and we will continue to consider that as we move forward. But we've built the framework to make sure that we can move forward in detailed design considering these things.
Okay. I'm last. So I did want to pick up a little bit on that particular question. So did I hear that the stacked townhouses are going to be one-bedroom townhouses?
So at this point, we anticipate there'll be a range, but predominantly one-bedroom type units.
Because I do agree with Councillor Timmers. Throughout the entire project, I think we've got parking, ample parking. That particular zone concerns me, and especially since it is right across from the park. And that if we have tenants or residents or owners' cars parked in our nice parking lot, we got a problem. We got a problem. So just
Yeah, understood.
just taking that into consideration. The other question I would have is, I get a little nervous when I see in your phasing as required. And when you look at that big green section, if you could talk to what the definition of as required is, and I'm particularly interested in an answer that would be, it's not going to change, it's going to remain as it is, and we're going to build it within the 8 to 10 years.
Okay, so that is my answer.
Good.
It's not going to change. It will
All
be
right.
built in the 8 to 10 years. And as required, as I explained earlier, it's market-driven, sir. The last thing you want is empty storefronts. In Casablanca, in Grimsby, we have the live-work units, which are empty, because there wasn't the population
Grimsby
base.
isn't Prudence, though.
No, but I'm
Grimsby is
just
not
pointing
Prudence.
out the fact that you have to have the population to support the commercial. So as the population grows, as traffic, hopefully the green belt gets amended and the Beacon and the other places get redeveloped and there's more population here, then the commercial uses start becoming economical and viable, and that's when they will be built as required, as market drives them.
And I totally agree with, we need 2,500, 3,000, 3,500 people here to help support the downtown commercial and some of that commercial and green.
Yep.
I would suggest that some of it could be you build it and they will come because they see the potential of the property.
Yes.
That this is being built. And for those that are looking for an opportunity, they're looking for a space. And if we don't have the spaces, they're going looking somewhere else.
So certainly the quick service facilities, the Tims, the gas bar, the Subways, you know, the KFCs, those types of places, they will come right away. I mean, the highway traffic alone is sufficient to accommodate that. So there will be a commercial nucleus there, and that nucleus will expand comparatively to the population growth.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, and you're absolutely right. We are, it's almost like, you know, we've had a child, and that child is now off to kindergarten, so we're putting that child on the bus and hoping that everything goes as planned.
That's right.
So, fantastic work over the last 3 years. It's been,
Thank you very much.
It's been a journey.
Yes.
Thank you. I do have one other comment with regards to the report, and I'm going to ask our CAO to make comment about the internal liaison working group, if you would, please, Mike.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thanks again for the opportunity to provide some clarification. Mr. Bruder did highlight this in his presentation, and I would suggest rather unorthodox, but I think in light of the scope of a project like this, the importance of a project like this will be an internal working group made up of staff and council, where we can keep the lines of communication open, where we can ensure that we're sharing information and having that necessary dialogue and input as we go through the next phases of this project, including site plan and so forth.
Thank you. So, there being no further discussion, we have a motion. The council approves zoning bylaw amendment application PLZ BA 201-80149 in the name of Prudham's General Partner, Inc., and that council approved draft plan of subdivision application PLS UB 201-80148 in the name of Prudham's General Partner, Inc., in accordance with the plan outlined in Appendix A and in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act and regulations thereunder, subject to the conditions outlined in Appendix E. And that all parties be advised of council's decision of the draft plan of subdivision application in accordance with provincial regulations. Note, appeal period is 20 days from notice of decision, and that council authorize the Director of Planning and Development to be authorized to endorse the draft plan as approved 20 days after notice of council's decision has been given, provided no appeals against the decision have been lodged, and that the applicant be advised that draft approval of this plan will lapse 3 years from the date of draft approval unless town council grants an extension of the approval period. If an extension is requested, an updated review and revisions to the conditions of draft approval may be necessary at that time. And that council enact and pass zoning bylaw attached as Appendix D of Planning and Development Report PD 5719 to amend the zoning for Prudham's Landing Development, and that council deem that zoning bylaw conforms to the official plan for the town of Lincoln, and further that council directs staff to create an internal liaison working group comprised of representation from council and town departments to provide guidance and oversight over the subsequent planning process up to final approval of the plan of subdivision PLSU B201-80148. We will require a mover. Councillor Bernay, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Council considered all the written and oral submissions and agrees with the planning report analysis and recommendations and finds that subject to the conditions of approval, this application meets the Planning Act criteria, is consistent with the provincial policy statement, and complies with the growth plan, the Niagara Region official plan, and the town official plan. We now are at the consent agenda portion of our agenda. There are no consent agenda items. We move to the regular agenda. We are now considering item 8.3 PD 53-19, zoning bylaw amendment application by Chester Kowalik. Thank you. Oh, I had the Jewsda right. Kowalik. Are there any questions from council? Seeing none, we have a motion. That council approve zoning bylaw amendment application PLZ BA 201-90043 in the name of Chester and Phyllis Kowalik. Council enact and pass zoning bylaw attached as Appendix B of Planning and Development Department Report PD 5319 to amend the zoning regulations for lands at 4490 Victoria Avenue, and that council deem that zoning bylaw conforms to the official plan for the town of Lincoln. We will require a mover for the motion. Councillor Pachariva, all in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, that is carried. Council considered all of the written and oral submissions and agrees with the planning report analysis and recommendations and finds that, subject to the conditions of approval, this application meets the Planning Act criteria, is consistent with the provincial policy statement, and complies with the growth plan, the Niagara Region official plan, and the town official plan. We are now considering item 8.4 PD 5419 zoning bylaw amendment application by 534754 Holdings Limited. Are there any questions from council? Seeing none, we have a motion. That council approves zoning bylaw amendment application PLZBA 201-90038 in the name of 534754 Holdings Limited, and that council enact and pass zoning bylaw attached as Appendix B of the Planning and Development Department Report PD 5419 to amend the zoning regulations for lands on 3930 9th Street. Council deem that zoning bylaw conforms to the official plan for the town of Lincoln. We will require a mover for the motion. Councillor Timmers, all in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Council considered all the written and oral submissions and agrees with the planning report analysis and recommendations and finds that, subject to the conditions of approval, this application meets the Planning Act criteria, is consistent with the provincial policy statement, and complies with the growth plan, the Niagara Region official plan, and the town official plan. We are now considering item 8.5 PD 5519 draft parking on an unauthorized area of land bylaw and amendments to the administrative monetary penalty system bylaw. Are there questions from council? Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Chair McPherson. I only have a question regarding the timing of this. If this is passed, how long will it take before we can enforce this bylaw? I don't know if our,
Mr. Smith, are you?
Mr. Smith could answer to that, or?
Yeah, come on up to the
So I'm just looking
podium.
for
Thank you, Dan.
timelines, because we definitely have some issues in our community with this happening, so.
Yes, I agree. So through you, Mr. Chairman, we're hoping to have the Public Information Center in early August. I think the 13th is what we have tentatively planned for. And provided, or based on the information that we're going to get back from residents who wish to comment on it, we should be able to turn this around fairly quickly. So I would say September or October, we should be able to bring this back to committee as a final bylaw. That's my expectation right now, but we'll have to see what happens at the Public Information
great.
Center.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I was just looking for some kind of a timeline, so thank you very much, Mr. Smith.
Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Smith. Just a clarification on this report. This is with regards to unauthorized parking, but this applies to property owners themselves parking their cars, their personal cars, boats, that what have you, on their own front lawn or side yards, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that's correct. So basically, we want to ensure in a residential zone that vehicles are parking on their driveway or in their garage or on the legal portion of the roadway. So anything that would be off of that would be deemed to be a violation of this bylaw.
Okay, so just for clarification, at first glance when I read it, it was like, I was thinking it was unauthorized parking by strangers, parking on properties, where this is actually going to affect individual homeowners and property owners with their own cars parked on non-proper or zoned driveways. So that's why I wanted clarification on this. Thank you.
It must be a Ward 3 thing, but that was the same question I had, is this, the owner is okaying anybody to park on his or her front lawn? The neighbors don't like that, so the neighbor calls in and says, there's half a dozen cars on this front lawn. That's what we're saying here. We will have a bylaw to get those cars off of the front lawn when the owner is given that car permission to be on his own or her own front lawn.
Yeah, well, the purpose of the bylaw is to hopefully keep vehicles on the approved portion of a driveway or parking area, whatever you want to call it. But ultimately, yes, it's strictly this portion is strictly for the residential zone. Like, it wouldn't apply to agricultural zones or industrial or anything like that. It's mostly for like the residential areas with families and things like that to keep vehicles off that. It's also for the purpose of, I mean, those areas aren't meant for vehicles with infrastructure in the ground, things like that, and obviously to meet other criteria within clean yards, property standards.
Good, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Smith, appreciate it.
Well,
So, there being no more questions, we have a motion to direct, we have Councillor Russell jumping in here at the last minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Just a quick question. Will the ticket go to the homeowner or to the vehicle?
through you, Mr. Chairman, it'll be the vehicle. It'll be applied to, well, we issue the ticket based off the license plate of the vehicle, so whoever the registered owner of the vehicle would be the recipient.
So multiple vehicles would get multiple tickets? If
Yep.
there's 3, it would be 3 tickets?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, it'd be each vehicle in violation would receive their own individual tickets.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one more thing, and I did read the report, believe it or not, but but I forget to, does this apply to the backyards as well?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman, yes. It would apply to any portion of the property that's not deemed to be a legal parking area on a property. Generally speaking, we're seeing this mostly in front yards, but it would apply to any portion of the property that's not a legal parking space, basically.
And one more thing, just to clarify, and according to the report, this will not necessarily just be on a complaint basis. This will be something that bylaw will be searching out and monitoring and taking note of and issuing fines.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I mean, typically, how this type of bylaw is enforced through other municipalities, and from my own personal experience in the past, residential zones would be a proactive type approach. However, that would be part of our procedure, standard operating procedure, which through discussions, we have some flexibility on how we would approach the enforcement, but typically speaking, it would be a proactive approach, yes.
Okay, and I'm gonna drive everyone crazy here, but, so it's mainly R1, R2, is there a zoning or a neighborhood, or this will all come out through the public information? Is it a zoning, like R1, R2, R3, where the enforcement will take place, or can this happen in a rural area as well?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, it's strictly for residential zones. There's a
Okay.
portion of the bylaw that speaks to road allowances, but that's just make it consistent across the town, but this portion on private property is strictly for residential.
Okay, that's all. No, that's it, thank you.
All good? Okay. Thank you, Dan. So we have a motion that we direct staff to coordinate a public information center to obtain input on the draft parking on an unauthorized area of land bylaw and amendments to the administrative monetary penalty system bylaw prior to being presented to council approval. We will require a mover for the motion. Councilor Russell, all in favor? Any opposed? And that is carried. We are now considering item 8.6, PD 5619, sign variance application by Up Cannabis. Are there any questions from council? Councilor Brunet.
Thank you, Chair McPherson. So I just want to go on record that I brought this up. So, you know, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole. I don't want to be confrontational. I mean, I understand why Up Cannabis wants to put, you know, the largest sign on their property that they can. I mean, they're facing the Queen Elizabeth Highway, and I don't have a problem with the illuminated wall sign, but the ground sign, you know, when I look at this, I have to ask the question. I mean, you know, we've been inundated with comments from residents for a long time about our signs up Ontario Street and how our signs don't seem to conform with what residents want. I understand that, you know, that Up Cannabis is looking for the largest sign. I just have to ask the question. You know, our current bylaw limits to the size of 4 square meters. We're being asked here in Up Cannabis's letter for a minor variance. I know this isn't committee of adjustment, but, you know, when I look at 4 square meters going to almost 15, that's not minor. And I took the liberty to drive up and down along the service road. I took the liberty to drive up and down the service road from Ontario Street to Victoria Avenue today. There's one large sign right tucked in the woods as you go around the corner by Virick, by Vineland Research. I don't believe it's an illuminated sign, but it's a big sign. But all those other signs along the service road, all along there, they're nowhere near the size of what we're being asked here. 12 feet by 12 feet, 19 feet up in the air. I'm only asking the question, are we doing the right thing here? I understand what Up Cannabis wants to do. They want to take advantage of all those cars driving by the Queenie to Toronto and Buffalo every day. I just got to ask the question, is this the right thing that we should be doing? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Through the staff?
Please.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So what staff actually looked at is, this is actually an area along the highway. So you do have traffic moving somewhat quicker than you would in other areas, which makes signs harder to read when you've got got traffic going by fairly quickly. This is also in an agricultural area. So those are the reasons why staff supported the larger sign.
Hang on. You're on.
I can appreciate the comment from the director. I just, like I say, I just want to go on record that it was discussed before we vote. I've been on both sides of the fence. As someone representing a business, we put up a new building on the 403, and we tried to go and get the biggest sign we could and use it to our advantage. But, you know, as a municipality, I think we have to be looking at this as well. And I just don't want to be burying our head in the sand and doing something blindly. It's my understanding, I stand to be corrected, but it's my understanding that Up Cannabis already has MTO approval. And if that's true, good on them, because I know we fought for 40 years to get signage increased, and we kept getting a major no for increase in signage. So I just wanted to be on record as that this was discussed before the vote, and I appreciate Director Dale's comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, times seem to have changed, because I can recall the John Deere facility in Grimsby back in the day had to move their deer to the front of their building because it was too distractive to the QEW. So I guess MTO is changed their ways and is allowing more visual, more potentially distracting signs along the QEW. So, no further questions. We have a motion that council approve the sign variance application in the name of Up Cannabis to permit the installation of a new ground sign an illuminated wall sign and is only valid for the existing uses on the site. We will require a mover for that motion. Councillor Reimer, all in favor? We have 1, 2, 3, 4 opposed. 1, 2, 3, and that is carried. We're now considering item 8.7, PD 58-19, Durham Road Water Main Extension. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Brunei.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm really pleased to see this is going forward. Seems like we've been talking about this for a long, long time. I'm really pleased to see it's coming forward. I guess through you, Mr. Chair, if there's any way that we could ask either planning staff or maybe Mr. Deanny from Economic Development, once this report is received and as we move forward, I understand, some of the delays have been with the region. I don't know if there's been delays with CN Rail and the railroad tracks, but I guess I'm just looking on behalf of the two businesses and this is in our Ward 2 that we ask through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, in a perfect world, when we think this could possibly be fast-tracked so that we can see this extension of this water main come to fruition. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Deanny, is that, or Jillian Harris? She's coming down to the podium. Thank you, Jillian.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. One of the delays that will still be impending will be the CN rail crossing. The application will have to be made by the two businesses themselves. With the water main extension, obviously we would support it with them. That could be an additional 6-month process. My understanding is that the design is ongoing as well, and they should have that portion with it, and then for the construction side of it. But the CN rail will be, that is kind of one pending delay that could adjust the time frame by around 6 months, with a window.
Mr. Deanny also has a comment.
Thank you, Chair. Through to the councillor. We have, from my perspective and from planning as well, and Jillian, we have committed to work with the businesses to see if we can fast track the application through CN. And we continue to work with both the businesses on a temporary solution until that can be ascertained or solved.
Still got the floor.
That's great. I appreciate both Ms. Harris and Mr. Deanny's comments, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Councillor Pachariva.
Yes, through you, Chairman. Like Councillor Brunei, I'm happy that this is here. Just a point of clarification in the report, it's Ward 2, it's not Ward 1 that's affected. And anything that we can do to expedite this process would be greatly appreciated, because this has been, at the forefront from the relocation of Corneef, and then when we saw the Up Cannabis and we saw the massive holding cells for rainwater and water down below, and talking with them how this would give them flexibility to expand their business and do their business. And again, this is just us living up to being a Center for Excellence in Agriculture and providing those businesses the drivers that they need.
Very good. So we have a motion that we receive and file the Durham Road South Water Main Minor Extension application from Up Cannabis and Corneef Produce Limited as outlined in report PD 5819, and that we direct the Director of Planning and Development Department and the Director of Public Works to review the proposed water main design by applicant with Up Cannabis and Corneef Produce Limited for Durham Road South Water Main Extension, and that we direct staff to enter into a development agreement with Up Cannabis and Corneef Produce Limited such that all costs associated with the proposed minor water main extension are the responsibility of the applicants. We will require a mover for the motion. Councillor Pachariva, all in favor? Any opposed? None, and that is carried. And we appreciate the Corney family being here tonight to show your support for this important project. And I want to tip a hat to the staff for working with the two businesses to make this happen. Nice work. So we are now to the confidential items on our agenda. There is none. Do we have any staff remarks? Seeing none. Do we have any committee remarks? Also seeing none. We are adjourned.